without further ado, let's get started with the first game. And we're going to start with board number 1. And the game of the season on board 1 as chosen by the players was the game Fishy Vishy against Swag Quark. Okay, those are obviously the usernames, as you might guess. And Fishy Vishy was actually board number 1 for the winning team Second and C. So the team Second and C won this season number 13, and we'll see if Fishy Vishy played in line with the team's name. Let's begin. So if you've seen my previous live streams, where I usually call them patron game analysis live stream, it's usually just for one side. But in this case, I'm going to cover the game for both sides. So I'm going to point out mistakes from both sides. So it's going to be a complete game analysis. All right, with that being said, let's begin. And we see the Gambit. All right, there we go. Accepted. And now knight c6. Of course, black has many ways to play against the Gambit. Just to point out one quick thing here, what I like to do, or what I looked at recently, is this setup, and I can recommend it to play like this: b5 and then bishop b7, castle knight c6, and it seems like that black has good chance for an advantage here. Of course, white has a lot of different choices here, such as rook e1, e5, bishop f4, bishop g5, and so on. But it seems to me that this setup is pretty decent for black, still waiting to develop these pieces and often having moves such as knight f5 and b4. Just a little tip here, what to look into for the future for Swag Quark. Knight c6, knight f3, d6, bishop c4, e6, castle, knight f6, queen e2. So these are the standard Mora moves. And I know this because when I was very young, I also loved to play the Gambit, but at some point I had to switch to something else, unfortunately. But always fills my heart with joy to see it on the board. And it's certainly a fun opening. Here you go bishop d7. This is possible, but just instinctively I would first develop the king side, right? What you usually want to do first in development, I mean, it's just a general rule of thumb. You want to develop your king side first, or rather the side of the board where you're going to castle. So in this case would be bishop e7. This is also the main move. So you're preparing the castle. And now rook d1, let's say, while it's threatening to go e5. So black usually plays e5 himself. And this is a typical position where white has decent compensation for the pawn, but not more than that. The position is balanced. So just to point this out real quick, bishop d7, there's nothing wrong with it right away, just something I noticed. Rook to d1, and here you go h6, also an interesting choice, also possible. The main move is queen b8, but to be honest, I think your move is just as good, so nothing wrong with that. And now, Fishy Vishy, you go knight to b5 to go after this pawn. I think you could start by developing your bishop first. This just makes a little bit more sense to me because you haven't developed the bishop yet. And in case that black goes e5, then it is better for you to have the knight on c3 still, because this square opens up on d5. And so it makes more sense for you to already have the knight on c3 rather than on b5. And if black goes queen b8 here, now you could of course still play knight b5, but you could also go after this pawn in other ways, such as queen d3, or maybe even play a little bit slower with rook d2, rook d1, and sooner or later really black has to go e5, and when he does, you can occupy the square on d5 more easily because your knight is already on c3. So this is just a small thing to point out, but you know, I like to point out everything I see, so this is something I noticed. Now bishop f4, e5, bishop to g3. The bishop is not very fortunately placed on g3. It's a little bit out of the game. And the only perspective it has on g3 is to go to h4. But even then, black can often play g5, and the bishop is somewhat locked out of the game. So I'd be careful of putting the bishop on g3 to have it somewhat cut off there on the king side. So I think bishop e3 was a better choice here, just to bring the bishop back to this natural square, bring the knight back, okay, and go from there. And a normal position with good compensation once again for white. So this is the problem with bishop g3. You're committing yourself to having the bishop there on the queen side and on the king side, and you cannot get it back on this diagonal easily, obviously. All right, let's keep going. And by the way, what I didn't say, please, if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. This is why we're doing a live stream, so that you can ask questions at any moment. And that would be good. So I'm seeing a comment right now by Tina, and he's saying, Nicholas, because you aren't streaming from Lichess, your stream can't be featured on the Lichess homepage, even though it was approved for it. Okay, it seems there was some miscommunication here. I thought that there would be some kind of embedding, and I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to change, or if I'm even able to change it at this point. I'm not sure how it works streaming from Lichess directly. So if you can point it out to me, if there's anything I can do at this point, let me know. I would love to have it embedded on Lichess or have it streamed on Lichess, but I'm not sure if this is still possible right now. But the other thing I said as well, if the players have any questions about this game or anybody else, please write it in the chat, and people are already asking questions. What about knight g4? Bartosz is asking. Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, my bad. All right, so I made a mistake here. I realized I was supposed to look on the games through Lichess, which makes a lot of sense, but I just forgot it in a hurry, and I'll do that. So we will check the games on Lichess. You just have to give me a little bit of time to set it up, but we'll just switch over to the Lichess design setup, and then we'll go from there. So we'll be right back. I'll just have to switch that. So I'll talk to you in a moment. Sorry for the slight interruption there. I just forgot that I was supposed to do it this way. And there we go. Ready now? Okay, perfect, great. Okay, awesome. So back to the game. And there were some questions. Bartosz asked, what about knight to g4? How to react to knight g4? Exchange the knight for a bishop on e3. Please also let me know at which moment. I'm guessing that after bishop e3 here, you mean knight to g4. Okay, you know, in the worst case, you could just move the bishop to d2. Just in the worst case, right? So this would be also an option. Of course, you want to keep the bishop. Yeah, bishop d2 looks natural, and then you can just push the knight away again with h3. Also, there was another question, I think here, maybe it was regarding the same position, which was, what about knight takes e4? All right. Okay, knight takes e4 here. That's right. Yes, that is also a great question. Well, different moves are coming to mind. Yes, we could play a move like bishop takes a7, but this doesn't look really convincing. I would rather try something like this. Bishop takes f7 and then queen c4, picking up the knight this way, and also obviously making the black king more vulnerable. Okay, so let me go back to the game. Bishop to g3, now a6, and I think here this was not necessary, because the knight on b5, yes, it's attacking the pawn on d6, but that's not really a big issue. And by a6, by playing a6, you're actually helping white to bring the knight back into a game and back to the square d5. So you could just develop here with bishop e7. And if now queen d3 to go after this pawn, then you have different options. You could just play bishop g4, because if... Actually, let me just improve one thing here real quick. If white takes on d6 now, you can just chop everything off and take on e4, and okay, you're once again up a pawn. So that's very good for black. Also, excuse me, also knight a5 looks like a good move. So it doesn't seem like white can win this pawn on d6 right away, and you can still later on play a6 if you need to. So I don't think there was a need to play a6 right away. Okay, a6, knight c3. Here you go bishop to g4. Once again, I'm really itching. That's the word I was looking for. I'm itching to develop my king, to finish the development of my king side. So why not play bishop e7? I can see that you're probably afraid of knight d5, but here you can just react very cool, play the bishop back to d8, and then continue with castle soon. Rook ac1. Here castle would be still too early, because white can go knight takes e5. Little tactic here, because the bishop on d7 is unprotected, and white would win back the pawn and be very comfortable. But you can further play bishop e6 and castle next move. Of course, white is compensation, but black is also pretty solid, so I think you could just go this way. Once again, don't have your king in the center for too long. It could come back to haunt you. Bishop to g4, knight d5, a good move. And here again, bishop e7 should be played. Yeah, even though here obviously it's not as pretty as the move before. White can already take it off and then you lose the defender of the pawn d6. But still seems like it was the safest option, because after knight takes d5, now bishop takes d5 was played, but e takes d5 could have been really dangerous for black. After knight e7, there's the idea to immediately sacrifice here on e5, and this is what happens once the king is still stuck in the center for so long and white has developed all his pieces. Such sacrifice become possible, but it's also interesting to play h3 first. Of course now black could take on f3, but then white obtains the bishop pair and good control over the light squares, for example knight g6, bishop d3. The bishop is really strong here as it is unopposed, and white has good control over these squares. Maybe you can even go h4, h5, and obviously occupy the the open c file. So this looks like promising compensation, and if black goes bishop h5, then take on e5, and here d6 would be possible, or also to go g4. Just a lot of different ideas here, and seems pretty dangerous, even though black can probably survive here if he gives back the piece with bishop takes g4. Bishop g6 would not be a good idea, because after d6 and knight takes e5, the white attack will be overwhelming. So probably in this position, black should take and then go knight g6 here. But still, it's very messy. White can still try d6 again, give a pawn like this, play queen d3, and go after the knight and play on the light squares. Very messy, very unclear, but seems promising for white. Definitely in a practical game quite dangerous. So in this position, e takes d5 was an interesting option. Alright, I'm just checking the chat real quick for any questions by the players, but doesn't seem like it. Okay, so bishop takes d5. Yes, that's a natural move, right? You want to keep this weak square, you want to keep this outpost on d5, but as you just saw, for concrete reasons, it was possible to take off the pawn and then to have these ideas of sacrificing on e5. Of course, this is concrete chess and you have to make sure it works, but if it works, it can be very strong. So bishop e7 now, here queen c4 was played. A move that I'm itching to play here is just to go h3 for starters, just to see what does the bishop decide. And that's a move you usually want to throw in anyway. You want to force your opponent to decide. Is he going to stay on this diagonal or will he stay on this one? He cannot do both. So here probably bishop h5 would be played to keep this pin alive, but now rook dc1, and now you could go queen e3 to unpin the queen as well, but probably best would be to win back the pawn here if bishop takes c6, even though black is also still better here in this position. Because, well, he has the bishops and he can use the b file, the half open b file. This just seems pretty comfortable, especially also considering that this bishop is somewhat out of the game, you could say. So queen c4, castle, rook d3 did also looked a little bit awkward to me, honestly, because the queen on c4 is right in the attack on the c file already, so black can win a tempo there later. Here, Swag, having trouble with his name, Swag, having swag, yeah, swag, okay, black. Played knight to d8, this seems a little bit slow to me, seems also a little bit awkward. Two options, either queen c8 or queen e8. I personally like queen e8 a lot because opening up to bring the rook to the c file and then, as I said, win a tempo on the queen. This looks pretty good, but queen c8 is also a good move. Also preparing to play bishop e6 if necessary. Different options. Both are leading to a clear advantage here for black. After knight d8, here comes the first, I would say, big mistake, knight to h4. Yeah, rook c3 would be a good move here to occupy the c file once more. And actually the best move now is to bring back the knight after all, knight to c6. Now white cannot win a pawn here because of this guy hanging on b2. And so white should just probably play h3, bishop d7, a3. And yes, white still has compensation, but black's position is solid, no weaknesses. This bishop is out of the game. So this is better for white. Better for black. All right. So this had to be played though, because after knight h4, there's a problem here, which is this move, bishop e2, which would just win an exchange at this point. But black missed this chance. Bishop e2 pretty much leads to a winning position here, because white can play bishop e7, but now simply takes on d3 and play rook e8. Nothing is really happening here. This is just an exchange and a pawn up, so black should be able to convert. I'm guessing that black want to do it even better, play g5 first and then go bishop e2 next move. I don't know, but g5 misses the chance, or actually gives white a chance himself, opening up the king. So let's see what happens here. White misses the chance, goes bishop g3 now, but bishop g5 was incredibly strong. It's quite nice. Okay, if black doesn't take, well, white is just up 2 pawns pretty much. So, and if black takes, there's queen to c1 is a very nice move to take on g5 next move, and this pawn cannot protect it because it's pinned. So black has no way to stop the queen coming in because of the knight e6. White just takes and that's it. The queen is coming in, it's checkmate. And notice how the black pieces are well, far away, right? The knight is interrupting the harmony here on the 8th rank. The queen is far away. The rook is tucked away, still on the original square on a8. So it's no surprise that this kind of sacrifice can work, because the king is all alone, right? There's nobody nearby. And queen c1 taking on g5 next move is winning the game here. Okay, so bishop takes g5. Notice not rook g3. This first looks good to go after these guys on the g5, but black can defend with queen c8, defending the bishop and offering queen trade, and that would be still fine for black. All right, let's go back to the game. See bishop g3, now bishop e2, so the plan by black worked out. Queen b3 was played. Well, maybe just go h4 right away here, just to create something straight away, because sooner or later black will take on d3 anyway. But it doesn't make that big of a difference in either case. Well, to be honest here, this position is lost. This is down in exchange and the pawn. And yes, you have the bishops, but they're not that effective. This guy is nice on d5, that's true, but this guy, not doing anything. It's stuck, it's not being effective. Knight e6, queen f3, king to g7, I like this move, prophylactic move, h4. And here, queen c8 is what you played here. But queen d8, bring the queen close to your king, and nothing's going to happen. If your queen on f6, what can happen, right? Bring the queen to f6, occupy the c file, and sooner or later you will win. This is super safe, right? So I think this is the starting point of your problems, playing queen c8 here, and not bringing the queen close to defend your king. H takes g5, takes, queen f5, rook e8, and this is the star move of the game, f4. I love this move. It doesn't change the evaluation of the position. Black is still winning, but it complicates matters, makes it more difficult. And this is what you want to do in chess. You want to make life as hard as possible for your opponent in any situation. And this is what f4 is accomplishing here, giving black some problems to solve. And black is unable to solve them here. He goes f6, and suddenly already with one single move the whole advantage is gone and the position is balanced again. That's chess, can go so quickly. Black has to take. And here's the idea, bishop e1 was the point to bring the bishop to this diagonal, and this looks very threatening indeed. But black is in time with his own play here of queen c5 check. Because the white king is also a little bit open. You can notice king cannot go to h1. That would be trouble. King f1 would also not be a good idea, because simply queen b5 check, take on b2, and now there's no bishop coming to c3 anymore. The queen can also come back to e5 to defend, so this is completely winning. So white's best shot would be to go bishop f2, and I need to drink something real quick. But now obviously the bishop is not coming to c3. White can still play bishop d4, and you would need to calculate this, right? It looks scary, but it works for black. Just takes, and queen g5 would be no perpetual here. The king just runs away, so nothing happening here. And after queen takes f7, excuse me, king h6, queen f6, the king can actually run all the way to h5, which of course is a scary thing to do, but it works. And after queen d4, for example, rook e5, black consolidates, is still up in exchange, and will win sooner or later. All right. Are there any questions by the players at this point? I see some discussion about dollars and euro. Okay, well, let's stick to chess, guys. Okay, I guess I'm going on here. Back to the game. f6. So here's what happens. White can take on e5 and take on e5 again. Maybe this is the move that was missed by black when you went f6 here, right? So take on e5 again, and now this changes everything, because if black now takes, white has perpetual, and so black goes queen c5, but here at this point probably should just take the perpetual, because of the rook f8 what happens is that you are worse. So this is a tough thing to do, because obviously you knew that you were winning, clearly winning, being the pawn in exchange up, and then to say, okay, I messed up, let's take the draw as long as I can take it. That's a tough thing to do, but that's what you got to do. Evaluate the position from what you have in front of you and not what happened in the past. So that's an important lesson here. And here I think you should have just taken a draw. And here the king cannot escape the checks. Would be a draw. So that's an important lesson, I think, for everybody. But it's not an easy. It's easy to say for me, and obviously also in hindsight, it's very easy to point out. But it's not an easy thing to do when you're in such a situation, you're winning, and then suddenly you have to switch and defend or try to make a draw, right? So not so simple. But after rook f8, bishop goes back to c3. White is better here. Or actually, not yet. Actually, I have to correct myself. White is not better yet, but it's getting tricky now. Now you already have to place an only move to keep equality. That only move was to go knight to d4 to block the diagonal here, and now white could give a perpetual again of queen d7, king g6, and now take on d4, queen f5, and white gives a perpetual on these three squares, and it's a draw. But already you don't want to be in that, excuse me, you don't want to be in that situation where you have to play only moves to make a draw. Rather, just make a draw earlier, force it, right? Because here you go queen b5, and now white is winning. King g1 was played. King f2 was a bit better, because you also have the h file available. If now black goes knight f4, as it was played in the game, then knight can go to g6. And here the rook can come into action right away. Queen h6, checkmate threat. Black can still defend, but this is also very promising for white, with now the bishops being monsters, right? Not only a bishop on d5, but also the bishop on c3 being an absolute monster in this position. And actually, I need to say that king g1 is not just an inaccuracy, it's actually a mistake, because it allows black to go back to the earlier position we just saw, where after queen c5, which was not played now but should have been played, then black could go knight d4. This is the position we just saw, and knight d4 would be equalizing here. So no need to allow this. Maybe here you, fishy were satisfied with a draw as well. Could be, because you were coming from a lost position and you said, all right, if I get a draw here, that's fine with me. So same thing to you as to Swag Quark. Evaluate the position from what you have in front of you, and if it's good, then play it. Do what you can. I heard this is what I said about Karpov. Karpov sometimes was defending a bad position for a long time, was tenaciously defending, and then his opponent made a slip. Suddenly Karpov got the advantage, and now he would just grind away till the end and not care about that he was worse earlier, and he would just play the position and then get what he could out of the position still. So that's important to remember. So queen c5 had to be played. After knight f4, now white takes on g5, knight g6, and queen e3, rook a8, rook f1, no, rook d1, excuse me, b6, rook f1. The next few moves, they don't matter too much. White is playing around a little bit, but white can do anything here. Black doesn't have any counterplay, and his king is really weak. These bishops, as I said, are very strong. So we can just see what happens here and get to the next critical moment, which is here. Rook f8 was played now. Queen d8 should be played, but this position obviously very difficult to defend. And even if you play queen d8, the position still remains lost, you could say, even though it's not that obvious how white will break through. Might take a while for white to break through. Even might be necessary to bring the king to the other side of the board, somehow tuck it away, maybe on a2, long-term thinking, to be able to push this g-pawn forward. So it's not that easy to break through, and you want to make it as difficult as possible for your opponent. Rook f8 gives white a straightforward win here, which is e5. e5 just wins the game right away. There's no discussion here. If takes here, pawn takes, check, wins the queen, that's it. Game over. And what else can you do? If rook takes d5, white can just take on f6 and then take the rook. So this is also no good. And are there any other moves? Well, taking the pawn obviously will not solve the problems either, so this would be immediate checkmate pretty much. e5 looks surprising at first because it leaves the queen and the bishop hanging on d5 and g5, but if it works, right? So we need to check those kind of moves as well. Queen to e7, rook f3, rook h8. Once again, e5 would be winning now. This time black can throw his queen in between on e5, but it doesn't matter because white is still up a pawn, and it's also a very strong pawn on d6, so white is completely dominating and winning here. Alright, so rook g3 is played, doesn't change anything, white is still winning. Queen to e8, and yeah, rook h6 would be better, but okay, it doesn't change much. White is still winning. So queen e8, queen f5. Here it makes a little bit more sense to remove the queen with tempo, to play queen f4, attacking the rook, and then after queen e7 to go queen g4 again, and here to go bishop c3. And if black doesn't do anything, just to see what happens, now the queen comes back to f5, and then e5 is the winning move. And the point is that the bishop has to be on c3 and not d5, so d4, so it's not hanging after black takes on d5. Here after queen f6, if now king h7, white can go e6, and it's too much. So you want to have your bishop on c3 rather than d4, otherwise black could probably just take it. And here after rook d1, king h2, it's game over because of the king g8 check. There's a counter checkmate on h8 made possible due to this pin. Okay, so queen f4 seems to be a bit more precise, but again, queen f5 is also still keeping the advantage, but rook c3 now is a mistake. Rook c3 is throwing away a huge part of the advantage. You had a nice grip here. Black can barely move, right? So what you want to do here is just slowly improve your position. Play something like bishop e3, rook h4, push the pawns forward here. And black doesn't have any counterplay. Black can just wait passively. And again, maybe you can bring over the king. And black is in a very tough spot here defending this position. Still, you have to crack it somehow, but you have time and black can just wait and see how you improve the position. After rook c3, however, black had a chance to come back, but he missed it. Knight e5 and then it's just gone. Knight e7 was necessary. Rook c7, now queen d8, attacking the rook. And actually the best you can do here is after rook a7, now king f8, another important move. But suddenly the knight is unpinned and attacking queen and bishop. And after queen f4, rook g6, the best you can do here is, well, win the queen, but it's not worth that much because the bishop on d4 drops as well. Black has 2 rooks, and this will be a tough position to win. It's still better for white, but we're far away from a win here. So you gave your opponent a chance here to come back with rook c3. And probably you stopped too early after 97, just saying, okay, I can pin this guy and should be fine. But in fact, black's able to unpin and then get back into the game. Of course, requires precise moves here, but you'd rather not give your opponent this opportunity. Knight to e5, rook c7, knight d7, and now it's game over. Bishop c3. Okay, there's no salvation here anyway. Rook h5, queen g4 check, and now rook g5, but it doesn't matter after king h8. For example, white has many ways, but I like this one. Rook g7. The queen cannot take because this guy would be hanging, and after rook takes, this bishop takes f6, king h7, and simply bishop c6. I like how these bishops work together beautifully, and this pin just picks up the rook. There's no check on d1, and that's it. Game over. After rook g5, white could just take on g5, take the rook because of this pin, and black resigned. All right, very exciting game. A lot of sacrifice, and you could argue that Fishy Vishy played in line with his team name, Sack It in C, and it worked out. It worked out. Yeah, a lot of sacrifices, and the position was of course very difficult after we had this f4 move. A lot of calculation necessary there. So I think my main advice for black would be here, don't let it come to that. Just bring your queen to your king and nothing's going to happen, right? If you have your queen on f6, you're safe. What can happen? So I think this is where the problems began, even though objectively where you lost the advantage was only later. But if we are in a winning position, we just want to minimize complications and problems as much as possible, and this is what queen c8 allowed, these complications, and then you stepped wrong there and white came back into the game. So for white, I would say Fishy Vishy, yeah, some tactics there with this. I don't know how much it was planned to sacrifice the exchange on d3, but this was not enough compensation, so you want to make sure you get enough if you sacrifice like that. And then there was even this chance to play bishop takes g5 to win an attack, but I guess this queen c1 move is what you missed there. So I like the fighting spirit afterwards with f4. As I said, I love this move, and then to have the bishops like that was of course very nice, and yeah, good finish here, even though this one point again you let your opponent out. But this is tough position to play for both sides, of course more so for black, but also for white. Tough position to play. All right, let me check the chat if there are any questions. Tina's saying bishops were monsters in that game. Yes, that's absolutely true. Yeah, you don't want to face such bishops.